Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, your Swansea City podcast. I'm Matt Barocco and I'm joined as ever by Steve Carroll. Evening, Steve.
Evening.
Well, we've got a couple of games to chat about this evening. The 1-0 win away at Blackburn, which was very much welcomed, and the spirited goalless draw at home to Sunderland. Let's start off chronologically, Steve, and let's go back to the game at Ewood Park.
Yeah, we should have conceded in the first minute, if we're being honest, shouldn't we? I mean, there could have been a very different game, I assume, if that had got in. But luckily it didn't. But we were really carved apart there, weren't we? It wasn't, Blackburn would be furious that they didn't score. It was a sitter, really, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't it, that chance?
Yeah, got to be honest. When you see him one-on-one then, he's just knocked it wide of the far post. And you're thinking, how is he not buried that? And you have to think that if it was anything other than the first seconds of the game, he'd have stuck it away. Perhaps caught a little bit cold, got away with that. And like you say, if that goes in, then you just don't know, do you? They're going to have their tails up. We're going to be rocked. And it normally takes us about 15, 20 minutes to wake up in games anyway and just kind of get into our rhythm. So being 1-0 down that early on would have been less than ideal. And I know it's all if buts and maybes though, isn't it, Steve? Because after that, we grew into it after, 15 minutes or so into the game then, and, a lot more control from our perspective then. Yeah,
I mean, the key incidents really were the fact that we had a couple of offside goals early on, wasn't it? I mean, because of the angles, it's hard to tell for certain, isn't it? I think if, Jamal Lowe was offside or not. But, I mean, my instinct really was the first one, which was the tap-in, that probably was offside. But
I don't think the second one was, though, do you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The second one with the through ball, that seemed to me more like it was probably on. So that was frustrating, really, because that was a nice move, a great pass. Lowe was finished well. And obviously it's been chalked off. Now, like we say, we're not certain of this, but from the angles that we had, like as you've said, really, it looked like a goal, didn't it? So that was frustrating, really. So, there isn't VAR in this division. And I think if we're being honest, if you look at some of the games that have gone on recently, I think it's got to be a good thing because, some of the decisions are baffling and they're taking an eternity. And even then, they're not always conclusive. So, but I think what would have been nicer from our point of view probably would have been to have had more angles at least so you could see if it was right or not. But my instinct, just like yours, was that the second one was onside, really. So that was frustrating, wasn't it?
I think from memory, it looked like it was going to be cut out before it reached Low, and it just carried on going through. And because he started his run when the initial ball came over, by the time it did reach him, it looked like he was in an offside position, but the ball had travelled a long way in that time, and obviously he started his run from deep. I thought watching the replays, as you say, it was a poor angle to judge from, but from watching the replay we got, it looked like the linesman didn't expect it to get that far and shit himself, basically, and didn't know what to do. So flag went up. It did look like, I suspect if we had the definitive angle, you'd see that he was probably a yard or two on because the ball travelled a long way before it got through to him.
Yeah, exactly. That was my thoughts on it, really. But unfortunately, it wasn't given, was it? But at least we didn't have too long to wait for that goal. And to be fair, it was a really good finish, wasn't it, by Liam Cullen with that sweet curling shot. Probably a goal that he needed because last year, I know he's got his critics at times. He scored 10 goals for us. Yeah. But I mean, this year he hasn't scored so many. I know he hasn't played down the middle probably as often as he would like. But at the same time, that was a really good finish. When then obviously it did prove to be the decisive goal as well, didn't it? But that Cullen, a lot of his goals have been tap-ins, really, haven't they? When you think back to it, but that one certainly wasn't. It might be the best goal he scored for us.
Yeah, I mean, Cullen gets important goals, which is something you can't always attribute to every striker. Some strikers are kind of like flat track bullies who score, the second in the 3-0 win or something like that. He gets the goals that kind of really are the difference between wins and losses quite often. I remember course, even scoring a massive goal in that playoff semi-final at Reading, or was it not the playoff semi-final? Sorry, the last game of the season when we won to take Nottingham Forest place. That was a massive goal in that game, and he scored the opener, Bristol City, down here in the season, albeit we went on to lose that game, but it was still, in the context of the game, a massive moment. It wasn't like, Bristol City had given up the ghost or anything. So he does tend to come up and shoot up in important moments. And he was very unlucky not to score a month or so ago with a rasping long-range shot that keeper tipped onto the crossbar. So it's felt like it's been coming with him, I think. He's spoken himself, being disappointed about not opening his account, or not scoring as many, rather, this season. But he was carrying on going, and it's great. Great to see from a striker's point of view that he's still got the confidence to take it on, cutting in from the right wing, and he's killed a beauty there, isn't he? Into the far side. And he'll be delighted. And again, it's proven to be pivotal, as you say.
Yeah, it was. Like you say, he has scored quite a lot of important goals. You think back last season, where we were on that struggling run, and the run that broke it against Bristol City, where he got the first goal. Obviously, it was a goal at Cardiff, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Like you said, that goal, but I think that Reading one might have been his first goal. Certainly one of his first goals for us.
Yeah, you're right. I think
that helped us into the playoffs, didn't it? But I think, did he score an equaliser at Coventry, I think, last season as well? These are just off the top of my head. So
I'm thinking as well, Plymouth the other week, where after a bit of a drab first half, he's come the closest with that curler. The keeper's just tipped wide. Again, he's getting into those positions, isn't he? So, you want to see a local lad come good, make the difference and stuff like that. Everyone likes to see that. So, it's particularly pleasing to see in that instance. And you just know, with him, whether you think he's, got the natural quality or not is subjective. But, with him, he won't stop giving, for however long he's on the pitch, because I think the other day, for example, we'll come to this shortly, but he was a bit of a sacrificial lamb against Sunderland, with the referee's decision dictating the way that game would go. But he's not one to grump and throw his toys out the pram. He knows what he's doing, and knows sometimes he's got to come off tactically. And he's never going to be one to grumble. He's living his dream at the end of the day.
Well, it does feel like that with him, doesn't it? You know what I mean? He's not, like, I'm not saying Cullen would be happy to necessarily be a backup, but I don't think either he would kick up a fuss. I mean, we should probably, in general, discuss the fact that he's out of contract in the summer. I mean, that's because that's something that's going to needs to be looked at, really, isn't it? Because from my point of view, I certainly wouldn't want him to leave. I think, there are question marks over whether he should be first choice, I think. But at the same time, I think, he's definitely someone that deserves to be here, and would probably be someone that's good to bring on if you need a goal, for example. And, at the moment, really, he's doing a job out of position, isn't he? Because, he's not a wide player, but obviously we weren't going to play with wide players. We've now decided to do that, but we don't have any. So we're having to put people out of position like we have done in the past. So, but I certainly hope he stays. I don't think he'd ask for crazy money either. I think you could offer him a reasonable deal, a couple of years extension, and he would take it. So, as far as I'm concerned, that would be a good move for us, really. And, I wasn't sure how much he was going to play this season, but I mean, certainly since the transfer window shut, he's been in the team for most games, really, hasn't he? So you'd have to say, really, that he's first choice, and he certainly will be, at least until the transfer window opens, and where we might have a chance, obviously, then to bring in, a couple of wide men, and then maybe he'll either be considered for that or to go back up front to his natural position. But yeah, I mean, how do you see it? Do you think he might go elsewhere, or do you think we should be looking to extend?
Well, to be honest with you, when the transfer window just gone, there was a lot of talk that, of all teams, Blackburn, we were just talking about, that they were looking to get him in, not as a direct replacement for Brereton Diaz, but certainly someone they looked to bolster their front line with, having lost him. So, they were considering that move, but obviously nothing came of it. Now, whether that was because he was already featuring as part of our first team picture, and that was us saying no, or the player himself saying, look, I'm happy to stay here. But one way or the other, that move didn't materialise. And, you have to think that, he's very much in favour here. The manager likes him. We can't say that for every player that we've got in our books. So he should continue to feature. There was an argument to say that, potentially he could stake a claim to be slotting in up front, and Yates isn't firing on all cylinders the last few weeks, and maybe an opportunity to give him a break and move Cullen back into his natural position. But long term, Steve, I think he's well worth an extension. If he gets us, 7-8 goals from a natural position this season, having topped up, like you say, with double figures last year, he's not going to break the bank, is he? And he's certainly someone who even if we did improve the starting 11 to that extent, he's someone you'd name on your bench every week as someone who could come on, get in the right position, because he has that striker's instinct. He always finds himself, I can't even remember how many goals he scored last season off Perot's chances, just being in the right place at the right time to stick it in. And like you say, they often appear then, they are tap-ins, they are just, slot into an empty net. But so often you see the strikers just not there to do that. So to have someone you can put in that position, you'll find that gap in between the defenders is a bit of a commodity you can't really afford to overlook. And I think he would be worth an extension of a year or two, just to have that option. And whether or not he's a long-term starter, it depends on our business, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but at the moment, you'd have to say that he's certainly worthy of a place in the squad at least. So, and as you say, I mean, I don't think Yates has been brilliant in recent weeks. So, there would be the option potentially of moving him up front. But I think the big thing is, like we saw with Obafemi, didn't we, last year, that if he's not playing, the guy's a pain in the backside. And, that probably doesn't help the squad, doesn't help morale and this type of thing. Whereas I couldn't see Cullen being a pain in the backside either. So, that reflects well on him then. And, it always makes you think that he's not somebody you really want us to lose. I think it would be a silly move, really. So I do hope that there's something going on in the background and they get it sorted out before the transfer window opens, really, because, I think it'd be a wise move for us to tie him down for another couple of years.
It's another one I'm going to mention. I feel like we mention it every week, every game we talk about, but you have to talk about Carl Rushworth again and how pivotal he is to the upturn in form that we've seen over the past couple of months and the results we're getting off the back of it. And almost all of them have been because of his interventions.
Yeah, he's played a key role in a lot of our games where we've picked up points, hasn't he, really? So, it's been a great signing, you've got to say. I mean, you're looking at Rushworth now and thinking he might be our best goalkeeper since Fabianski, really. So he's making so many good saves, and there have been one or two mistakes as we know, but everybody does make the odd one. But Rushworth really has proven his worth for us, isn't he? And you do wonder where we'd be if we hadn't signed the goalkeeper. So it's Rushworth without doubt has to be one of our players of the season. He's making big saves all the time, and if the opposition are creating chances, you just look at him and think this guy might just dig us out of trouble here. And obviously, if you've got a goalkeeper like that, it's a huge thing, really, isn't it? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Rushworth's career. But I'm sure it's great that we've obviously got him for the rest of this season, and I'm hoping that we might still be able to keep hold of him next year as well, because he'd be a real asset for us. But like you say, he's making big saves and he's gained us a few points without a doubt, isn't he?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, I know we spoke about this about a month ago, but I'd be shocked if he wasn't playing Premier League football. And, maybe even for, his parent club, Brighton, I know they have gone from strength to strength since, since Potter went there. But, he is at a level, and we can talk about it, having seen and witnessed where the standard of Premier League goalkeepers were when we were in there and stuff. And you just think this guy has come into this team, and you talk about his crucial shot stopping, and it is a massive asset of his, but it's his positioning as well and his distribution. He's the full package, really, isn't he? And like you say, his career could go from strength to strength. I would be at this moment very surprised if he doesn't end up capped by England, because he looks like the sort of player that would come through. He's still very young, he's got youth on his side, and you can just see a natural progression there for him. He needs another good loan, of course, next season if he's not going to make the Brighton team. But I can't imagine there'll be any shortage of suitors.
Yeah, well, I think that's what will give us a chance maybe of having him again next year, because Brighton have just spent 20 million on a goalkeeper in the summer. And I mean, they're going between him and Jason Steele at the moment. I think they haven't really made their minds up over who the number one is, but I just don't really see a team spending 20 million on a goalkeeper if they had someone waiting in the wings that they feel could be close to the first team at this stage. I mean, I'd have thought they would have just stuck with Steele for this season and then be thinking about Rushworth for competing with him next season. But the fact they bought a goalkeeper makes me think that's not the case. So I think you could easily see a situation like you did with Freddie Woodman, where Newcastle just decided, right, well, Woodman did well for one season. He's guaranteed to play, so they'd be happy to send him for another one. So I do think there would be a chance of another one. But I mean, like I said, the fact is, for someone like Rushworth, would be wasted on the bench, and he's still very young. So if he can be up on loan, gaining experience, then I could certainly see him potentially being with us for another year. And yeah, I don't think anyone's going to complain about that, are they? Because, like you say, he is a top goalkeeper, and whether he'll play for England or not, I think it's a bit of a way in the future. But I certainly wouldn't rule it out at this stage, because what we've seen from him, then he's certainly a goalkeeper I would think that long term could be another one in the Premier League. But for now, let's just hope he carries on doing well for us.
Oh yeah. Well, the intrigue with him, of course, is that Brighton couldn't always certainly be sure. I mean, he had the year in League Two, did well. Had the year in League One, did very well. He's made the natural progression up to the Championship now, and he's absolutely bossing it. I'd be surprised if he doesn't end talking for goalkeeper of the year in this league. So where do Brighton send him next? He has to really take the next step. It's either going to be for them or it's obviously going to be in the Premier League, you'd think, because he's proven himself to be, I don't want to say too good for this league, but he's certainly one of the best keepers the league has to offer. So I'd be surprised if he does play back for us, but love the optimism. And like you say, Freddie Woodman spent a second year with us, so it could be something that they, just say, well, you know what, we're really happy with his progression, and he's really enjoying his football down here. So let's make sure that he goes somewhere where he is going to play 46 games a year. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. What's going on in Brighton's mind about him, who knows? But they'll be delighted they got that player as their asset, because he's tearing it up. But to be honest with you, defensively, it's so resolute. I think the word I keep coming back to, Steve, is professional. The way we deal with the opposition's threat this season, in direct comparison, I suppose, to our most recent memories of our defending in the last couple of years, it's been calamitous, isn't it? We've just gifted goals with silly defensive mistakes and overplaying at the back, and we've bemoaned that time and time again on these podcasts. But this season, there just seems to be a little bit of maturity in the way we handle the opposition threat. And again, it's no surprise that we've come away from Ewood Park with a clean sheet. We've dealt with the opposition threat. Yes, we've had the goalkeeper to thank, and a couple of one or two maybe mistakes that Blackburn would have rather obviously see hit the back of the net. But realistically, we've stepped it up this season, and we're dealing with opposition attacking threat.
Yeah, there has been an improvement defensively, isn't there? I mean, we've still conceded a few goals, mind, and I think Rushworth is the key reason why it hasn't been worse, really. But look, I mean, we've highlighted that chance in the first minute, haven't we, at Blackburn? And if that goes in, it could be different. But I mean, after that, there weren't a great deal of big chances, were there? I think they had one or two. There was one, remember, in the second half that was pulled wide. So they'll be disappointed with that. But no, I mean, I think there's a definite improvement. We're certainly not gifting some of the ridiculous goals that we did last year. I mean, we're not seeing goalkeepers now, letting in dull shots. So if you know what I mean, shots that are maybe are accurate, but not, should I say, they're maybe straight at a goalkeeper with a bit of power, or they're flapping through, or diving too late, letting one slip through. These types of things are not happening today, which is a big relief after last year. So that's the main thing, isn't it? But I suppose you always want more. But be interesting when we talk about Sunderland now, because there were certain aspects that were good, but the funny thing is, I'm not sure that how can I put it? if we'd had 11 men all game, the result might have been a bit different, I think.
I'm just doing the maths now. In the last 9 games, we've only conceded 6 goals. And that is from the upturn when we played QPR and obviously that after the horror show at Cardiff. And we look at those results after that then and say, well, this is when we started to come together. So we've only conceded 6 goals in the last 9 games. And of course, 3 of those were in one game at home to Leicester. So if you disregard that, as they were obviously taking the piss out of the rest of the league, 3 goals in 8 games in the other fixtures is not to be sniffed at, is it, Steve? I mean, it's showing, as you talked about there, a marked improvement in keeping the opposition out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Leicester, you have to sort of take in isolation, not just because we've let in 3, but I mean, we were playing against a very good side, really. So, I think that was always going to be a more challenging one. But I mean, as you say, yeah, there've been a few clean sheets in there. And I mean, Sheffield Wednesday and Millwall were dominant wins when a clean sheet at Blackburn, obviously one against Sunderland, which we'll go on to discuss. But I mean, yeah, it's been a big improvement there, certainly in the more recent games, because as we've said, there was a big problem for us last year, was conceding too many goals. And, it is good to see those clean sheets. And I suppose it does coincide, really, doesn't it, with having that more settled back line. Obviously, we've talked about Rushworth, but I think it's obvious now that Darling and Humphreys are regarded as the first choice centre-backs. And then, Timon has been playing mainly at left-back, and then it was Key, but obviously I know he's injured now. But to be fair, Ashby, I think, has stepped up the last couple of games. I think there's been an improvement there, so that's encouraging. It's a shame that Key is injured, and hopefully he won't be too long until he's back. But I certainly think Ashby has picked up from earlier in the season, so that's got to be a good thing as well.
Yeah, a player that's come into the team. Obviously, he was there at the start and perhaps struggled to get to the pace of the competitive level of this game and stuff like that. Having played all of Newcastle's pre-season tour and impressed there, but of course, different temperament, different tempo when you get down to the nitty-gritty, especially at this level. The Championship is probably one of the most grueling with the fixture pile-up as well and the demands that come on with that. But we spoke a few times about how unhappy, or rather not unhappy, but disappointed we were with his early season performances and how he wasn't quite, considering we made Josh Key play out of position to accommodate him, and Josh Key was still doing better despite being on the wrong wing. It was a real eye opener, perhaps for him as well, to see where he was at. But since he's come back into the team, courtesy of that injury to Key, he's really stepped up again, and he looks a lot more confident in the way he's playing as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He could have scored at Blackburn as well, couldn't he, Ashby? I mean, there was that decent chance. I mean, he's pulled the shot just wide, but he just looks like he's maybe, think about it, he came here, didn't he, not long before the first game of the season? I mean, it would have been a big change for him coming down here. I mean, geographically coming down from Newcastle to Swansea's a big change as it is, and playing men's football. I think sometimes people underestimate that. It's, it can be a big jump, a bit of a culture shock, and sometimes if you don't start well, maybe you're, it can take a bit of time to get going. So maybe that little break from the first team has been what he needed, and now he's back in, and he'll show us what he can do. But look, the main thing for us will be, and we certainly didn't have this last year, is competition for places. So it's going to be a case of, Ashby's got the shirt now. If he carries on doing well, arguably you should keep it. And then obviously Key's got to try and win it back off him. But that, in theory, should always bring the best out of people, because we know last year we had major issues in certain positions where, you couldn't really drop anybody because there was no option. But that's not the case now. Things have got better because we've decided to add more depth, and that's a big positive from that. Then is that Ashby knows he's got to play well to keep the shirt, and that will give Key knows that once he's back, he might not necessarily walk back into the team.
It's a great problem to have, and it's something we haven't said in many years on this podcast, but in quite a few positions, we do have an embarrassment of riches. There's little excuse for us not to be able to change it. if we do get an injury or we're trailing and stuff like that, we've got players that can slot in or offer something different. And through the season, we've seen players like Josh Tymon come out to the team for three or four games, and Cabango now, who's out injured and is staying on the bench with Humphreys and Darlin, making up the centre pairing of the four. So and Key's dropping out with injury now, and Ashby's coming. As you say, there's players that can slot in, and it's great because it doesn't mean that your whole season hinges on, like, if you consider last season as a crude example, if Joel Perreault had got injured, you have to wonder how we would have resolved that issue. But with the current situation of the Swans now, Cullen scores the winner at Blackburn. Yates hasn't scored in a few weeks and stuff, but you've got Lowe, who's chipped in with a few goals. Patterson's been a resurgence. Ollie Cooper's got a couple. We've got players chipping in. You wouldn't think that one player missing or being rested would ruin our chances of getting a result, would you?
No, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, before, like you say, Perreault being one of the main ones, really, because we just didn't have any options, did we? I mean, we were always decent in centre midfield, for example, and centre back. But I mean, we're talking interestingly about the right back situation, and obviously that was a really key position for us. That was, well, it felt like we didn't even have one in the first place because Lata Baudier was playing there all the time, didn't it? And if Manning was injured or suspended last season, then you're in a situation there where realistically, what do you do? So
yeah,
that I think they were the key positions really where there just wasn't much depth. I mean, I think at least in the middle in general, there was options where, even if you weren't happy about it, but I mean, you think you've similar options to now, isn't it? I mean, you had Grimes, you had Fulton, you had Allen, and obviously Walsh then came back fit and stuff like that, and Cham, of course, Patterson. So you think of it like that, there were actually quite a few players there that could come into the team, but in other positions it wasn't like that. So it's certainly picked up quite a bit since then, and like I said, that really is what you need, isn't it? To get best out of people, quite often you need to have them thinking, right, if I don't play well, someone's going to have my place. Where last year it wasn't like that, and obviously once Bender got injured, we've spoken about it so many times with the goalkeeper. No matter what happened, he wasn't getting dropped, and that really needed to happen, didn't it? So yeah, we're in a position now where we've got options, and that is a good thing. The only thing we don't have is wide players, and obviously we're going to have to do something about that.
Well, that would be if you could keep the current lot together and add a few wide players in January, there'd be little excuse, because you'd have pretty much minimum two players for every position then, wouldn't you? Apart from perhaps goalkeeper, but really speaking, you just really hope that Rushworth plays every game this season as you hope he would, and there'd be no reason to chop and change that. But you're just looking at wingers now, aren't you? It's clear to anyone who's got a pair of eyes that the back five being sacrificed was the best thing that's happened to this club in about three and a half years. So you'd consider that to be or 2.5, but you consider that to be a massive step forward. And now the recruitment's got to catch up with that, doesn't it? And buy the players for the new positions, because we're finding ourselves now with our only real winger, Josh Nelly, out for the year. It's a massive, massive loss because he was coming into his own. But the players that have stepped in and deputising his players, Cullen and Lowe, have not let the shirt down in the way they've played. But let's roll on to Sunderland then, Steve, because we did start touching on it a few minutes ago. But this is a game you come into and you think, well, they're probably in our mini division of this division, where you consider they're probably hoping they'll get playoffs. And of course, with the money we spent in the summer, you'd think that the owners here are thinking, can we get an outside chance of playoffs here? There's a lot of strong teams. It's probably the strongest the championship's been since we've been in it, but you've got to aspire to achieve something at the end of the year. So we'll be in that mini mix with them, in the mindset of, can we get up there? So you go into it a little bit thinking, well, what sort of result can we get? We haven't had the best form at home. And I didn't actually expect the game to be dictated by the twat in the black, really, but it was, and I should have known better, because Bobby Madley's done it time and time again, and he's not letting himself down here either.
Yeah, he's not one of our favourite refs, is he? I think that's fair to say. I mean, I always remember that game with Stoke years ago where we were 2 down, we come back to 3. I think it was literally 10 years ago, around this time as well, which is quite odd, isn't it? I mean, we were, like I said, we come back to 3-2 up, and then he gives the ridiculous penalty for handball on the line in the last minute, and they equalise 3-3. And obviously, I remember that idiot Mark Hughes coming out and saying that he can understand why you give it. It was like, well, yeah, you're the only person that can, and that's because you're unbelievably biased yourself. But
absolutely despise that bloke.
Yeah, Mark Hughes is a funny one. He never used to be that bad, like when he was Wales manager, but he sort of morphed into an incredibly miserable git, over the last few years or whatever. But Madley had a terrible game, really, didn't he? I mean, the red card for Patino for a start. I mean, I'm not buying it. I couldn't actually believe he'd given it. I mean, I didn't. I think I turned away and didn't realise he'd sent him off, and I was just flabbergasted, really, that he'd given him a red. I mean, just farcical. But he just seems like one of those referees, doesn't he, that quite likes to make it about him. And obviously they're the worst type, because the best refs will always be the ones that you don't notice. So, like, if you come away from a game and you're not really talking about the ref, you're always like, well, you haven't done anything wrong then, if you know what I mean. And I know sometimes you have games, don't you, where decisions can be dodgy and you think they can go either way or whatever. But he just seemed to, I don't really know what he was doing. Like, I know he left the profession, didn't he, a few years back. It's like, it's a shame he's come back, because he is one of the worst refs. And if we never get him again, it'll be too soon, won't it?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. He's one that loves the limelight, and loves the, loves being the centre of attention. And there was the early booking for Patino, which, I mean, Jesus Christ, it was the first tackle the bloke made, and I would have said in 99 times out of 100, that's a free kick and a quiet word. But if you've booked him then, and then like 10 minutes later, there's a blatant... Well, he's pirouetted on the ball. The same guy is pirouetted on the ball. Patino's come, and there's been like a coming together. But certainly if you just booked the bloke as well, in almost every other instance there, the ref would have a final word and just say, listen, you've already been booked, calm down. But no, he could not wait. And this is the thing about it. It's a headline maker in himself. And, he's been disgraced before, and that's, why he was, booted out of the game and stuff. And the man is a disgrace to officiating, to be honest with you. Interestingly, so someone put on Twitter that they were curious as to, in the last year or so alone, he's reffed Newport, Wrexham, Cardiff and Swansea, and every time he's given very, very dodgy decisions or games against all 4 Welsh clubs that he's played ref as. So there was that question mark that someone asked then, and said at some point someone's going to have to ask the question, because he's not playing the same game. There was if the game where he's going and booking Patino on his first challenge and then sending him off on his second, yet when given a penalty, the goalkeeper goes up to the penalty spot and kicks the ball away, and yet the ref just doesn't do anything about it. And you haven't seen it. You think, well, what sort of... You're either a strict ref or you're not. You can't just be strict for one team,
Yeah, I think that's the problem, isn't it? Like, say, with that penalty, you're thinking, well, he was on his case for that, and then he was on Rushworth's case for time wasting, and he was doing it with and it was ages ago, and he wasn't really doing it at that point. I think later on in the game, maybe fair enough, but I think that was...
He doesn't book Luke O'Nien for the penalty either.
No, exactly. It's these
you get a penalty for dragging down the box. It's a booking, right?
Well, it should be, shouldn't it? I mean, you see obviously the fact that Patino's had a soft yellow early on, and obviously has contributed to a red then. I think they are the type of things that annoy you. Like, sometimes, if you've got a strict ref, but he's strict for both, you can say, right, that's not the type of referee and I want to see. But if it's consistent, at least you can say, that was the approach he decided. It's not one I agree with, but I sort of get it, and he's been consistent, whereas, he's been fussy with us, it feels like, but not with them. It's probably because he'd given us the penalty, and he thought to himself, Christ, why have I given them a penalty now? So I better, I'm going to have to try and do something that helps out Sunderland or something. But I don't know what he was doing. He was bloody awful.
But it's nice. You get these moments in football sometimes where you think, you're up against it. We've had a couple in the recent years where you think it's us against the world, and that siege mentality that can be formed as a result of that. The players were flabbergasted. Michael Duff picks up a booking for screaming and shouting at his displeasure of the referee's performance. And there was a moment then, wasn't it, particularly probably about the 55th minute or something like that, where you're just looking at the clock thinking, this is a long old way to go. And Sunderland were having all the possession and pushing us back further and further. And then, the team dug in, got some crucial blocks in, and then the fans reacted. And the next 35 minutes were, as I say, there was that siege mentality. And, we won't be beaten here. We're going to dig in and throw ourselves in front of every ball. And it was a real nice experience to be part of. The atmosphere was great, and you kind of felt then with the hymns and arias ringing around, and I Can't Help Falling in Love with You, and all those songs that kind of rally the players and stuff. It's it was nice, wasn't it? It was nice to get everyone singing off the same hymn sheet. Excuse the pun.
Yeah, I think that is the one good thing, because the atmosphere was a little bit flat, really, in general on Saturday, I would say, but it did liven up because of, as you say, a bit of a siege mentality and the fact that the ref wasn't very good. But, think about it as well. The first half hour until the red, we didn't have a lot to shout about, did we? I can barely remember us having a shot. And if we're honest, Sunderland carved us open quite a few times and probably should have been in front. They'll be frustrated that they weren't at that point. And, obviously, I think we were better with 10 men. Because I felt like then, I know obviously going forward we weren't great, and it was always going to be hard when you've got a man less, but it did feel like then as if we pulled together a bit and actually had a plan about what we were going to do, because in the first half an hour, I thought we were awful, if I'm honest. It was a really poor home performance, and I actually think that the red card helped us, and we may well have lost if we hadn't had a sending off. So it's a bit of a funny way of looking at it, really, as if I'm a bit concerned at the fact that we were poor and didn't show much, and there was a lot of aimless long balls. But I will at least applaud us in terms of how we dug in and we defended well. And if we're honest, Sunderland, the majority of their chances, came from shots from outside the box, didn't they? They didn't create too many clear-cut openings after that red card. So that just showed we sat quite deep, didn't we? We didn't really allow them to play through us because we had a lot of players back and stuff like that. And yeah, look, we made it work, didn't we? So you can't criticise that. But, the penalty, though, we're going to have to discuss that, aren't we? Because, from my point of view, look, how can I put this? If penalties don't always get scored, do they? We know that. The chances, I think, if you look on an XG, a penalty's about 0.8. So that tells you 4 out of 5 penalties usually get scored, right? But, we'll all accept the odd miss. But what Lowe was doing was just silly. Why would you, it was, I can't even call it a run-up because there was no running. It was just basically like a snail's, crawl to the line, almost trying to be too clever. And the goalkeeper obviously got the right way and they saved it. But, look, just don't do that. You're opening yourself up to criticism. The two things you should never do are a stupid stuttering run-up or a chip down the middle. Because if you miss with either of them two, people are going to be furious. So just literally.
Let me play devil's advocate here, because another famous stutterer, Andre Ayew, scored almost all of his penalties, barring the odd one. Would we be having this conversation if he walks up to that and the keeper dives the wrong way?
I'd probably, given how slow the run-up was, definitely. I think if you do one little stutter and you're waiting to see if the keeper moves, I think that's not quite as bad. I still personally don't like it, if I'm honest. Yeah. But what Lowe was doing was he was barely moving, was he? It was
a poor penalty as well. It was practically only just left of centre. So a perfect height for the keeper as well. So he wasn't as if keepers, had to clamber over to the corner to claim it. It wasn't a great connection. I think, to be honest with those penalties, it's always the same, isn't it? You start your run up, the keeper gets, hands in his pants, really ready to dive, and then the striker's looking for the keeper. Which way is he leaning? Which way is he going to jump? But in this instance, the keeper had his book. He completely read Lowe's game, and he stayed upright till the very last second. So Lowe, having walked up to the ball, then has to make his own mind up because the keeper's not giving him anything. And of course, then as soon as he wraps his foot around that, the keeper's made his mind up, and it has to be a really good penalty then, because he's going to go the same way as the ball. if it isn't a good penalty, as we saw, it ends up being quite an easy save.
That's the problem, isn't it? I mean, it looks silly, didn't it? And I was fuming, to be honest with you, because I was thinking, well, we're up against it here now. We've managed to get ourselves a penalty. And you're thinking to yourself, well, if this goes in, we've at least got a good chance here of not losing, because obviously it's going to be difficult for Sunderland to get 2, because we've obviously got 10, which means we're going to
sit behind the ball, yeah.
Yeah, it gives you something to hold on to. Now, I know in the end we did manage to get a draw anyway, but he just shouldn't have done it. That's the truth. He needs to learn from this. And, from my point of view with a penalty, just pick your spot and go for it. Don't muck about. Don't try and be too clever, because when you try that, because eventually, as you've seen, it backfires, doesn't it? Like, I'd always argue, try and go for the Ruud van Nistelrooy approach. Low and hard. Try and get it into the side netting. And, those penalties in general are very, very difficult to save.
And if you can get them into the side net, and obviously you run the risk the closer you go to that post that you miss the target. And obviously Ruud van Nistelrooy was the best striker in the world, doesn't he, in his years?
Yeah,
so,
but you can practice it, can't you? That's the thing. Spend hours trying to perfect it. I know you can't replicate the pressure of a normal game or whatever, but it is something you can just practice and trying to hit the same spot. And, but the fact is, like I said, people... no one will score every penalty. We'll all accept that, but don't miss like that. That's the issue, really. I can't imagine Duffer's very happy about it.
No, absolutely not. He can't. He doesn't seem the type to enjoy anything fancy anyway, does he?
Well, I can imagine if he was taking a pen, he just put his foot through it.
Yeah, like a Graham Alexander pen.
Or Matthew
just run. Exactly, run straight at it and absolutely thwack it. But yeah, I think, well, I mean, listen, you couldn't begrudge him taking it at the time. He'd scored his previous 2, but Grimes has also scored one this season, so you wonder now if the next one comes along, whether that, and we don't talk about the fact that we've had quite a few penalties this season compared to what we normally get. So it does show us that rather than the slow, patient, sideways build-up, which takes us, gets the opposition back in place, the fact that we are playing a little more quick ball forward and direct with our play is getting us into positions which is winning us penalties this year. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I think the time we were getting the most penalties was probably on the Rodgers, wasn't it? When we had Dyer on one side and Sinclair on the other, and I think quite often they were the people that ended up being fouled for penalties. So you think if Ginnelly had managed to stay fit, then maybe even more. Obviously, he won us one, didn't he, against Sheffield Wednesday? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you think those type of players are always more likely to win you pens. So it'd be a good thing now if we can get somebody in January, because obviously that does have to be the priority, doesn't it? So yeah, like you say, it is good to see us winning more penalties, at least, because obviously we know they're a golden chance to score, aren't they? And obviously if you're winning them, it just shows you that you're asking questions in the opposition area, and you're like forcing a foul, aren't you? So that is good play.
2 I want to highlight from this one: Carl Rushworth again, we say this every game, and Harry Darling.
Yeah, Darling headed a lot of corners out, didn't he? I mean, he was very good in the air, to be fair to him. And yeah, like you say, Rushworth again, he bailed us out a few times, didn't he, as he often does. I mean, I think by the end of the season, this is going to sound like a broken record talking about it. But yeah, no, they did well. And, defensively, it was really good. I think you'd have to be honest and say that last year we probably would have ended up losing that, wouldn't we? But
well, we've seen this game last year, haven't we? We've seen games like this where you're just hoping, see it out, and there's just a lapse in concentration then, and they sneak in on the back and bang, a goal goes in, and then you're set up then to defend. And if you can't then twist back to be an attacking team, you end up, defending a defeat, essentially. You're really struggling. Like, had Sunderland scored late on in that game, you'd have to wonder, would we be able to go back the other end and claim an equaliser? Probably not. But you'd have to say we were set up then, especially with Cabango coming on to turn it into a back 5 or a centre back 3 at least. But we were like a back 7 at that point, weren't we? But yeah, again, another player who came on, did his job admirably.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was that was a sensible move. I think I may have not have done it as early as we did it, but I think as the game got later, I think it's sort of inevitable you're going to end up dropping deeper again, aren't you? And the opposition are going to try and force us into a mistake and put us under more pressure. So I could understand why that that sub was made, really. And Cabango in those situations is always likely to. He's good in the air. He's more your old school defender, isn't he? So, I think a sensible sub. I probably would have made it a few minutes later, though, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I think in the end, it all looks so much better because the desired result was achieved, wasn't it? I mean, from the moment we went down to 10, you're thinking, well, to be honest, up until this point, it's been looking all Sunderland. So what's it going to look like now? And in the end, we were far better as a unit, having lost Patino. Not because we lost Patino, but as a result of our tactical switch. It's hard to know, and I completely validate your point about we were better with 10 because we were, but we've seen on a few games this season already that we've gone through fits and starts in our performance. I remember Norwich at home, where in the second half they battered us for about 35 minutes, and in the last 10 minutes we battered them, and you just think we've just found a second wind from somewhere. So I mean, it's all hypotheses, and whether you think Sunderland would have gone on to win that game comfortably if there was 11 versus 11, possibly, but we could never say for sure because the way we sometimes turn into games and turn away from them, and our form comes in and out during the same match is it's all predicting how it would have gone, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but it certainly felt like, didn't it, the first half hour until the red card?
Oh, they were a much better team for that first half hour. They were in the
ascendancy. They were creating chances and cutting us open, and it did feel like a goal was a matter of time away. I think that was the problem, and it felt like we weren't threatening at all, didn't it? So the red card did change the game, and it would be interesting actually to hear what a Sunderland fan thought about it, because do they almost feel a bit like they were doing well and the red card didn't really help them?
Well, to be honest with you, Sunderland and Swansea have experienced this exact thing up a Stadium of Light last year, where Luke O'Neill got red carded. We
dominated the ball, didn't we? But we didn't. And we went and won it. But we did end up winning, as you say.
Yeah, and I think that sort of thing then is probably going to add to their frustration, because they've bemoaned their lack of firepower, looking at what their fans are saying in terms of they can't stick the ball in the back of the net, and that's been an ongoing issue for them. But having seen them, come against us who were poor with 11 and then backs to the wall with 10, and them not being able to really, ask too many serious questions, as you say, the long shots aside, they were just hopeful efforts, really. Like you say, their better chances certainly came before we had a man sent off, and that's where they would probably look at and say, well, we should have scored in that period. But when they went down to 10 up there, we eventually carved them open. I think we scored 3 in the end, and won the game quite comfortably. So it's a lesson. You need to have, when the opposition put so many players behind the ball and ahead and everything away, you need to think of something else. You can't just... And the longer the game went on, you felt like that's all they had, isn't it? They were putting balls in the box, trying to get... And you're thinking, this is meat and drink for Humphreys, Darling and Cabango. And then when it came back out, there was one moment, which I've spoken about on Twitter, which was... when the corner came in and Darling, I think he blocked the initial shot for the corner as well. But the corner came in, he wins the header from the corner and races to the edge of the box then to block the follow-up shot. And you're thinking at that point, that is siege mentality 101, isn't it? The players were throwing their bodies on the line and everyone was willing. There was, the 16,000 in that stadium willing Swansea just to see it out, because it was such a mammoth effort in that second half.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, inevitably you're going to tire, aren't you, as it goes on. But there was a lot of really good, last ditch defending, really, wasn't there? And a lot of bodies on the line, and you could just sense the real determination, really, to make sure that we came away with something. And I felt in the end we deserved it, to be honest, because, like I said, we battled well, and the opposition didn't really do a lot, as we said. With I think in the end they were only going to score through a wonder goal, or if someone made a mistake, really, and they didn't get either. Yeah,
I was thinking the only chance they're going to have here, there was a few times where they got in behind after Ashby got picked up an injury. I think they targeted that side as well, and they got in behind him a few times and cut it back to 10 yards out, and there was no one there to stick it away. But you were thinking at some point here we're going to get an unfortunate flick on or a deflection or something that's going to see it go past the helpless Rushworth, because other than that, you couldn't see how they were going to score. But, they kept trying. And to be fair to us, we were so, resolute in that back line. It's nice then. Everyone went home, and, Sunderland would have come down here thinking a point isn't certainly not the worst result in the world for them. And for us, given the way the game went, a point is certainly a point gained.
Well, it's got to be a point gained, isn't it? I think without a doubt. Honestly, if we'd scored that penalty at half-time, I still would have been thinking to myself, I'd probably still take a draw at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. You know how games can turn on a head, and you would have thought then, well, Sunderland are going to bring on an extra striker and start committing men at us then, because they'll have nothing to lose. Of course, there's probably only really did that after about the 65th minute, I think, or something like that. They started making those very attacking substitutions. But I'd be surprised if the result didn't go differently had it been 11 versus 11. But it is hard. It is hard to predict with the way that we play how it would have turned out. But everyone's happy in the end, and Duff comes away and says how proud he is, and the fans are going home happy on a Saturday night despite the goalless draw at home. It's a rallying spirit that everyone gets behind, don't they?
Yeah, I think there's not many times you cheer a 0-0. I think the most obvious would always be that Nottingham Forest game in the playoffs. Obviously, that's the greatest. I mean, we had a 0-0 at Anfield, didn't we, in the first year in the Prem? And I remember Wales drawing in Belgium once for the qualifying for 2016. So those ones stand out really, because in general no one relishes a 0-0 today. But I think in the end everyone was really pleased with it. And it did. If it's ever going to feel like a win, it was probably the other day, wasn't it?
Yeah, and interestingly, the Forest one you talk about again was a 10-man game, wasn't it? Where you just think, you have to dig in, you have to all play as the same team now and make sure there's no gaps in between players to be exploited. And that one, it did feel like, we had our destiny in our hands then, because if they can't beat us in their own ground when we've got 10 men for 89 minutes, then you have to think then that when they've come down here 11 versus 11, we're favourites. And that was the shared feeling, wasn't it? When
I don't forget as well, that's another one where the ref has screwed us, and it just gives me the perfect chance just to say that Mike Dean is the worst ref who's ever lived.
He's still involved. He's still getting involved in the games, and
he can't leave it, man. He's an attention seeker, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's retired several times over the past few years. But man,
he was going to retire during COVID, but obviously he couldn't retire without a crowd, could he? Because his ego needs it.
Yeah. I once set you off on your Mike Dean tirade. I know. Where does Bobby Madley fit? Because there's been 3 or 4 instances with Mike Dean, with Swans related. Of course, when they involve Cardiff games, or a playoff game for us, it's those are always the ones that hurt more. But Bobby Madley's racking him up as well now, isn't he? He's an attention-seeking tosser.
Yes, but Mike does remain the worst. There's other instances with Mike. I remember once I went to Spurs and Michu was down with a head injury, and he took an eternity to call on the physio. I remember thinking, you do realise there's a head injury here, you absolute clown. Mike is the worst of the worst, and he had to make. Thing is, in a big game, he had to make it all about him, didn't he? If you know what I mean. That was like his chance again, just to, put himself in the limelight and all this crap. And it did feel with him as well as if he had a problem with us. But I can assure him, if he's listening, which he's not, we've got a far bigger problem with him than he's got with us. Madley is not very. He's not very good, is he? Let's be realistic about it. I mean, look, we're all grateful that people are willing to be refs and stuff like that. But if he decided to walk away, I think there would not be any tears shed here. I mean, he went off to Norway or something, didn't he? I think I can only hope he goes back there.
Yeah, and plenty of opportunity to add in some slanderous comment here, but I'll resist the temptation. There was a few chants from the stands, which if anyone was in the stadium on Saturday, will certainly probably recall them. But
if he goes back to Norway, chance to go dog walking and stuff like that, isn't it?
Oh well, this is on you now. The slander is up there. But yeah, it's it was another poor performance from a ref, but a great point. So So, Steve, 2 games we've reviewed here, 4 points. I mean, you would have taken that beforehand. You would have thought that was a good return. And crucially, after the last podcast where we played so poorly in the game and people were saying, oh, that's it now, the wheels are falling off Michael Duff, he's got to go and stuff like that. And we spoke in this last podcast about how this trio of games could be big and how he needs a win in them to assure fans that that performance was the Watford performance was the standout and not the norm. You know, that was going to be the one that was just in isolation. And we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? And we said it's really important now that we bounce back. And, you know, fair to say, 4 points in 2 games, you can't grumble at that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, like I said, I did see things that alarmed me against Sunderland because I thought the performance was crap until the red card. But, yeah, look, I mean, 4 points from 2 games, it's... You know, I think everyone in terms of points has got to be fairly happy with that, and they certainly an improvement on what we saw previously.
Yeah, and again, it's a steady improvement. And I know we talked last time about how the first 7 games is miserable and ultimately horrible they were to watch from a Swans perspective. You take them aside, 4 points in 2 games, can't grumble, even if there were signs there you weren't too happy with the performances. And as I was going to say, Steve, that it looks like when you consider, if we talk about the opening 7 games and how poor they were to watch as a Swans fan and how miserable those results were as well with no wins, take them aside, and the form since, and certainly the results since, suggest the top 4 or 5 team, you know, in the promotion hunt. So the turnaround has been remarkable, really, hasn't it, in terms of getting the results since then. It's been a massive upturn in the points.
Well, it does feel a bit mad, doesn't it? I mean, you look at the game with Bristol City where we were really poor, for example. I mean, if I'd said to you at that point that one of these 2 managers here will not be in a job at the end of October, I mean, I'd have said straight away, well, it's got to be Duff, because we were completely outplayed by Bristol City. And you think that now they've made a change and Duff is still here and is quite safe, really. So it is a funny one how football can turn out. I mean, obviously we thought his job was seriously on the line, but he's managed to turn it around. And like I say, if you look at the points tally over the last, 9 games or so, then yeah, there probably aren't too many teams that have got more points than us. So yeah, it has turned around a lot. I mean, we'll see how we go, I suppose, over the next few now. But yeah, certainly think that things have improved without a doubt, haven't they? I mean, I'm still not enthused by some things that I see, but you know, you can't argue with some of the, like I said, the improvement of us defensively, for example, has got to be a good thing.
Yeah, exactly, and we're not short of goals either, which is something which was perhaps a concern when we lost Joe Pirro in the summer. It's great to see that we've got goals coming in from lots of places and scored 3 on numerous occasions this season. So long may that continue and long may the results continue, because if you're keeping it tight one end and scoring quite freely at the other, then that's always a recipe for success, isn't it? But you segued us quite nicely there onto the next game, Steve, where you talk about how we continue. Well, if Leicester was hard, we're probably not going to have much of a respite in this game, because we go to Portman Road to play Ipswich, one of the other runaway teams so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a hell of a start, haven't they, to life back in this division. I mean, obviously been out of it, haven't they, for a while. I mean, the last time we played them, I think, was the first year that we'd come down out of the Prem, wasn't it? I mean, you remember that crazy game where they beat us 3-2, where we dominated, really, and somehow lost. Bit of a story there, wasn't there, really, under Graham Potter.
The goal of the season.
Yeah, the great Selena goal, of course. But yeah, I mean, they did superbly last season, really. I mean, it was quite an intense promotion race, wasn't it? But they were brilliant for keeping clean sheets when it got to, the business end of the season, really, wasn't it? And they've sort of picked up where they've left off. I mean, I don't think anybody certainly. I wasn't surprised that they've done well. I mean, I thought they could easily be a team that could be in and around the playoffs, but I didn't expect them to be, about 8 points inside the top 2 at this stage. I think it's quite remarkable, really. I mean, whether they'll stay there or not, I don't know. But they have done superbly, to be fair. I mean, their last couple away from home, I think they were 2 down the weekend against Birmingham and come back to 2-2 when they had a draw at Rotherham then last night. So they're still ticking over really, although by their standards, so not 1 and 2 games, considering how well they've done, is probably, I'm not sure they've had that all season really. So, but yeah, look, it's going to be a tough game, and we know it's a brutal trip to go all the way there. So fair play to anyone that is making the effort, but it looks like a tough game, doesn't it? We've got to be honest. I think if we were to get anything there, we'd have done very well, wouldn't we?
Yeah, you'd have to think so. You say quite often you do see there are a few teams that tend to sit in that middle ground between League One and the Championship. You talk about your Wigans and your Rotherhams and stuff like that in that situation. This season, of course, Sheffield Wednesday. But there are other teams, of course, that can come through with such... Well, you've got the whole town behind you. You've had such a great season. Everyone's talking about the glory days returning, etc. And you can carry that on for the first 2 months of the new season just on momentum alone, can't you? And certainly, whilst I'm not disparaging them or talking them down on their performances, it does seem to be the momentum from last season has carried on into this.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you do see it happen, don't you? I mean, teams sometimes, they get a bit of momentum behind them, and they can be tricky to stop. I mean, we've seen a few times, haven't we, teams have back-to-back promotions. I mean, I know we didn't do it under Kenny Jackett, but I mean, you look at we started the next season like a house on fire, really, didn't we? I mean, the feel-good factor and the momentum that we built up just stayed there, really, didn't it? So there is always that possibility, really, and Ipswich certainly have done that. I mean, they've got an exciting young manager, haven't they, in Kieran McKenna. They'll be desperate, I would have thought, to keep hold of him. They'd be very concerned if someone decided to try and poach him. But I think Ipswich must be, they've been out of the top flight for over 20 years now. So this is, one of the strongest that they've been since then. I mean, I think when they first came down in 2002, I think they were, they had a couple of goals in the playoffs, didn't they? But since then, I think other than one season under Mick McCarthy, I think they've struggled really, or they've been in mid-table. So I mean, they certainly weren't a promotion contender during our stint in the Championship. I mean, about 15 years ago or so. I mean, when obviously we finished just outside the playoffs a couple of times and then got in there and went up. I mean, they weren't. I don't think they ever finished above us during that time. So, yeah, there must be a real feel-good factor at Portman Road at the moment, and it is going to be, I would have thought, certainly our toughest away test so far.
Yeah, and that is really. We talked a few weeks ago how we'd measure our progress, having played Leicester, coming back off that international break, and you think, well, okay, they were just a cut above. We did compete for large parts of it, but when it came down to it, they just showed their quality, bringing like Iheanacho off the bench. And here's another example of measuring where we are at, really, isn't it? Because this is the other team that has wowed the division and been difficult to stop. We've come up against some tricky tests so far. I mean, we did remarkably well at Plymouth away, albeit their form had hit an indifferent patch by the time we met them. So this is one that's really going to test Michael Duff and the squad's acumen, really. And what we can come up to, we haven't got obviously a full strength squad to pick from, and we have had to play players who were otherwise maybe been on the bench, but that is the beauty of having the depth that we spoke about earlier on. And really speaking, Steve, the players that are going to play should be licking their lips at this, because it's another opportunity for them to make the division sit up and take note and say, well, actually, Swansea City might be a team this season that could be around the top six when the final ball's kicked. Well,
I mean, we do have an opportunity to do that, judging from the form that we've had recently, but it does feel like a huge ask. I mean, from my point of view, this is the type of game where, if anything that we manage to get there's got to be a bonus. But I mean, like you say, there's not really a lot of pressure on this game, I don't think, because they're a side that has done remarkably well so far this season. So it is going to be very difficult for us to get a result. But I mean, we are sometimes the type of team as well, though, that plays better against a side like this. I mean, how many times have we struggled against the lesser side, should we say, and certainly the sides that maybe come down to us and, sit a lot of men behind the ball, don't really try to do much other than catch us on the break. And you would have thought with Ipswich being at home, they'll be on the front foot and they'll try and get after us, and maybe that'll give us a chance. So that's how we have to try and look at it. But anything we get, from my point of view, would be a bonus. I think a point would be a great result there.
Oh, absolutely. And going to international break, and from where we were earlier in the season, it's a great upturn. We were looking pretty much stuck in the bottom six group back then. After that defeat to Cardiff, where you thought, God, it's going to take 3 or 4 good results just to get us out of this little hole we were in at the bottom. Now we find ourselves, as we speak here, on 13th, in 13th place, with a bit of a buffer towards the bottom 3. We spoke a couple of weeks ago, Steve. We'd be shocked if the bottom 3 weren't, at least 2 of those 3 weren't concerned that at the end of the season there, because they're already 5 points adrift down there, Rotherham, QPR and Sheffield Wednesday, and there does appear to be something of a gulf between the teams at the bottom now and the ones that were necessarily there in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the year.
Yeah, I think, it seems unlikely that Sheffield Wednesday are going to stay up, doesn't it, for example? I mean, like you say, the likes of Rotherham and QPR are struggling. I mean, I'm fairly sure that, how can I put it, that we won't finish below them. I mean, if we finish below any of them, I'd be very concerned. So, I think we'll be okay in that sense. But as you say, I mean, there are a few lesser teams, and I think I'm not surprised that those 3 are down there. And I don't think many people probably are. I mean, Rotherham are always a small team, really, at this level. QPR have been a bit of a shambles, haven't they, over a period of time, and obviously Sheffield Wednesday came up, but you'd think with a big team they have had some momentum, but obviously the chairman seems intent on running it into the ground. So, and of course they changed the manager, which seemed very harsh. And yeah, I think it's not a shock that they're down there then either.
Yeah, you do get a point. We do get a point. We could potentially, we'd certainly consolidate our position, you'd think, around the mid-table mark going into next international break. And what would your view be then on where we're at? Because that would be 16 games in, which is just over a third of the season gone. It's very difficult to give us a report card, isn't it? Because if you judge it at the start of the season, horrendous, and we're looking at when he's going to get sacked rather than if, and all the rumours came out, and then almost with a flick of a switch after that Cardiff game, it seemed to, all the rumours stopped, the results started coming, and Michael Duff all of a sudden has found something in that squad to get us propelled up the league.
Yeah, like you say, it is a funny one because of the peaks and troughs that we've seen. I mean, the moment has been, since the last international break, it's probably been a bit more normal, isn't it? 2 defeats, then a win, and then a draw. I mean, that's 4 points from the 4 games. I mean, that's it's not brilliant, is it, overall? But it's at the same time it's a bit more average, isn't it? Whereas opposed to before, we were seeing obviously 12 points from 4 games, and obviously before that, what was it, 3 points from 7 or something? So 4 from 4 seems a bit more normal, really. But I think we've seen progress defensively. We're definitely better. The problems we've got, as I've said, really is the lack of wide players, which do limit us in terms of this formation, really. From my point of view, we do see too many aimless long balls at times. I think that does frustrate me. I've got to be honest about that. I think, we've got to be better on the ball at times, trying to keep it better and stuff like that. I mean, I don't want to see us aimlessly lumping it up the pitch. I just don't. I think we're better than that. When we've been successful, we've never done that. So I don't think we should be doing it now. So, those type of things. I don't think Duff is a Swansea way person, should we say. I think, so he's not my ideal manager, but I can see some positives with him. And, the fact is, because results are picked up or whatever, then you're not going to make a change, really, are you? But, yeah, we'll just have to see how we go.
Yeah, how do you judge this? Because I agree, he's a step away from your Martinez and Rodgers, etc., and the managers, even Russell Martin as well, of course, who would get everyone rallied behind them. But we had, under the more recent, as we talk so often on this podcast of style versus substance. We've had 2 substance managers and 2 style managers. Now, our 2 style managers in Potter and Russell Martin have both got us mid-table finishes. And the 2 substance managers could potentially be a lot more results-based, and how you sit on that spectrum is completely a personal opinion.
You have got to look at it another way, though, I think. The substance managers have had significantly better backing in the transfer market.
Yeah, absolutely, they do. Cooper had the parachute payments spent on all those Premier League loans, and Potter had a youth squad to pick, and of course Russell Martin didn't get backed, and now we've spent millions on replenishing the squad for Michael Duff. You're absolutely right with that assessment.
Yeah, well, like I said, Potter had limited options, and also the players that he had. I know people will say, well, he had Roden, Roberts, James, McBurney, but we've all got to remember these guys, especially at the start, were incredibly inexperienced. There was no guarantee they were going to be that good. Luckily for us, they were. But Dan James at the start, particularly, I would say, wasn't very good, but then grew into it. And we were really short, weren't we? Martin Olsen got injured in the December, and we were short then in that position, for example. And at centre back, we did only have 3 centre halves all season, as another thing. So we were stuffed there, and Martin was. But as soon as whatever it's called, once Trevor Birch came in, there was more of a plan, and Cooper was given back in with loan signings, and it did feel like there were options there. We had 5 centre backs at one point, for example, compared to 3 the year before. That's a massive change, isn't it? And and this guy in general has been backed. Duff can say that he hasn't. We don't have wingers or whatever, but the reason we don't have him is because he didn't want to play him. So he can't argue that he's not been backed. So I think that's what's interesting about it. Yeah, that maybe the substance ones could end up looking the better ones. But it's not really a fair playing field, I don't think. if Martin had been backed even a little bit, I think 3 points off the playoffs may have been in the playoffs, as an example. And I think in the same way, you look at, Potter was shafted with, other than McBurney, we didn't really have a striker, did we? We had Baker Richardson, but he's playing in League Two now, I think, which says it all. So I think that's what you're up against, really. I think it's not really a fair comparison.
Very interesting to see how the 2 sets of managers have been treated on different circumstances, isn't it? And how one has seen. But you have to, when you look at the way the games are played out, we did plenty of stinkers so far this season under Michael Duff, but so often under the other managers, Potter and Martin, you'd find us outplay the opposition, 75% possession, and concede absolute stinker of a goal, and you'd end up thinking, God, they put so much into that, and that was obviously the disappointment of them, but the football was an absolute joy. So we are where we are. As you said, I guess, is the assessment. We're mid-table. We pretty much deserve to be where we are because we had such that horrible start that the upturn since then, Steve, could only cover up so much, can't it? So we're going to have to see where we end up after this Ipswich game, and indeed after the international break, because we come to a point then when you really start to see the packs, if you like, of the division start to be formed, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And as ever, opinions are formed over periods of time, and the longer the manager has, the longer opinions will be formed. But we're just going to have to wait and see how things play out. The fact is, the manager, I can't say he's my favourite necessarily, but I can see some positives there, and we'll have to just see how it plays out, really.
Well, hopefully it'll be if there's anything, it'll be like that Sousa situation where he's come in to solidify the defensive issues that the previous manager left behind, and maybe when he goes with a shake of the hand and wish him well, and the next manager can come in and put the pieces together. But absolutely see how that goes. Before we finish the podcast, I know you said you'd be delighted with a point at Portman Road. I would completely agree with that. It would be a great point for us to take into the international break. But as ever, Steve, we've got to end on something positive. So have you got any nuggets for us this week?
I don't know if I have, to be honest with you. Well, the week after we can't lose, so because there's no game. That's one way of looking at it. But we could be stewing on this, can we? If we do lose, because there isn't a game for 2 weeks. But look, we'll just have to wait and see. The fact is, we're we're about a third of the way through the season now, aren't we? So, I think we've got a reasonable gap to that bottom three. So from that point of view, if we do lose on the weekend, it's not really the end of the world, is it? But we'll wait and see. I do think Ipswich, and they're not going to, probably maintain the pace that they have done so far this season. I'm not saying they're not going to go up, but I certainly think they're going to be a strong candidate to finish in the playoffs. But there's a chance they may not. They, like I said, they may start to drop a few more points. They've not won in the last couple, so we'll see how it goes. But I think there's no time we don't need to be panicking too much if we were to lose. We've seen some positives recently, and like I said, the league table doesn't look terrible now. It certainly looks a lot better than 2 months ago.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And our final thought from Steve there. Your mood for the next 2 weeks will be determined by the game on Saturday. So let's get behind the boys and hope that we can set ourselves up for a nice fortnight and another couple of steps up that league ladder. Cheers, Steve. That was a lovely chat about the last couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll get back on in a couple of weeks' time before the game after the international break. But from myself and Steve, thanks for listening. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.